Before we dive into these scary stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy true horror content every week. I was halfway through my sandwich in the cafeteria when the intercom crackled to life. Code Black. All teachers, initiate lockdown procedures immediately. The announcement sent a chill through the room. Code Black meant one thing: lockdown. Every student knew the drill. I stuffed the rest of my sandwich into my bag, my heartbeat accelerating. Around me, everyone was already moving, chairs scraping as students bolted for their classrooms. I was on the far side of the school and knew I had to hustle to make it back to Mr. Peterson's class before the doors were locked. I slung my bag over my shoulder and broke into a jog down the long corridor. The hallway stretched ahead of me, eerily quiet now that most students had already made it to safety. I was about to take a right turn when I saw a figure standing at the far end of the hall. It was my friend Jack, or at least it looked like him. Same backpack, same messy hair. "Jack?" I called out, confused. He didn't respond but gave a small wave before turning and disappearing down the stairs to the basement. What was Jack doing down there? The basement wasn't exactly off limits, and in a lockdown you're supposed to go to the nearest safety room, but no one ever went to the basement. It was dimly lit and was mainly used for storage. Against my better judgment, I decided to follow him. "Jack, wait up," I called out. The basement door creaked as I pushed it open. The single flickering light bulb at the top of the stairs barely illuminated the steps. "Jack?" I called again, stepping cautiously down the stairs. Nothing. No answer. The basement was dark, except for the faint light from a cracked bulb overhead. I strained my eyes, trying to make out shapes in the darkness. Rows of dusty shelves lined the walls, stacked with old textbooks, broken desks, and forgotten equipment. "Jack, if this is a joke, it's not funny," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We should head back to class." Suddenly, from somewhere deep in the basement, I heard a scream. Not just any scream, it was violent and raw, the kind of sound that makes you want to run away. It didn't sound human. My body stiffened, and for a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I forced myself to speak. "Jack?" No answer. Then I heard it, the soft, deliberate sound of bare feet on concrete. The steps were light, unhurried, and coming closer. "Jack, this isn't funny," I shouted, trying to mask the fear in my voice. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. I strained to see in the dark. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Then the footsteps resumed, faster this time, slapping against the cold floor as they moved in my direction. I ran for the stairs. My feet barely touched the ground as I raced upward 2 steps at a time. When I reached the top, I grabbed the handle and pulled. The door didn't budge. "No, no, no," I whispered, yanking at it with all my strength. It was locked. Behind me, the footsteps were growing louder, closing the distance. My hands shook as I pounded on the door, desperate. "Help! Somebody, please!" I shouted. The footsteps were almost right behind me now. I didn't dare to turn around. "Help!" I screamed. Just as I thought I was done for, the door swung open and I stumbled out, nearly knocking over Mr. Peterson. "What are you doing down there?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "The lockdown's been lifted." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stood there, chest heaving, trying to catch my breath. "Get back to class," he said firmly, ushering me down the hall. I didn't need to be told twice. I rushed back to my classroom, my head spinning with what had just happened. When I entered, my classmates were seated, talking in low voices. Jack was there, lounging at his desk like nothing had happened. "Jack," I said. He looked up, confused. "What's up?" "You were in the basement," I said, staring at him. "No, I wasn't," he replied, laughing. "I've been here the whole time. Ask anyone." The other students nodded, confirming his story. My blood ran cold. If Jack had been in class the entire time, who or what had I seen in the hallway? I never went near the basement again. I was 16 and in my last year of high school. I had always hated that school, especially back in grade 10, because of personal and health issues, but at least I had two good friends. Unfortunately, we weren't in the same class, so we only really hung out at lunch or recess. That day started off as just another boring, uneventful grind. We were stuck in class working on assignments, and I was bored out of my mind, counting the minutes until lunch. I sat there doodling in my notebook, barely paying attention to anything going on around me, when suddenly the PA system chimed. The principal's voice crackled over the speaker. Code black. At first, I didn't even register what he was saying. I'd never heard of code black before. But then he said something about locking all the doors and my ears perked up. It took me a second to realize that this was a lockdown. Finally, I thought, something exciting for once. Nothing ever really happened at that school, so this was the most interesting thing I'd experienced in weeks. At least we'd get out of doing our work for a bit. The teacher sprang into action, rushing to lock the door, close the curtains, and cover the small glass window in the door with a sheet of paper. From the hallway, I could hear other teachers moving quickly, locking the main doors to the foyer. The layout of our grade block was pretty simple. 5 classrooms that all opened out into a shared foyer. The foyer itself had 4 couches where students could relax during lunch or recess, and 2 doors at either end that led straight outside. My classmates settled into their spots. Most sat at their desks, but a few of us, including me, grabbed spots on the bench seats. I've always been more of a keep-to-myself kind of person, partly because of the health issues I'd been dealing with since grade 8. So, I sat there quietly, observing the room. The silence was deafening. This was the quietest I'd ever heard our grade block. Not a single sound from the other classrooms or even the hallways. I wasn't scared, though. I don't scare easily. But something about the silence made my skin crawl. It was unnatural, suffocating. As the minutes ticked by, my mind started racing with questions. What's going on? Is this happening inside the school or outside? Are we in danger? Is it serious? Could someone actually be here to hurt us? My imagination ran wild. My eyes darted around the room, scanning everyone's faces. I could see the unease in their expressions, the nervous tapping of fingers, the darting glances. My classmates didn't look scared exactly, but no one looked calm either. I tried listening for any noises outside the door, but it was impossible to focus. A couple of people were whispering behind me, their voices breaking through the silence and ruining my concentration. I clenched my fists and sighed under my breath, feeling a mix of frustration and unease. If there's no actual threat, can we just get back to work already? I thought, my annoyance starting to bubble over. The lockdown felt like it lasted forever. My mind kept going to worst-case scenarios. I'm a tough guy. I've never had trouble standing my ground or defending myself. But sitting there, waiting for something to happen, was agonizing. Every creak of the floor, every shift of someone's weight in their chair made me flinch. I didn't like the waiting. Finally, the principal's voice came back over the PA. All clear. Return to normal activities. Just like that, it was over. The lights were turned back on and everyone groaned in relief. The rest of the lesson dragged on uneventfully, but the second the lunch bell rang, rumors exploded in the halls. According to the whispers, someone from our grade, a kid we all knew, had cornered the assistant principal with a knife. No one knew exactly why, but the story spread like wildfire. Supposedly, they'd been expelled on the spot, but the assistant principal wasn't hurt. Even now, I think back on that lockdown. I'd been so eager for something exciting to break the monotony of the school day, but looking back, yeah, I'll take boring over that kind of excitement any day. I always stayed late after school on Thursdays. It was my one quiet time to catch up on homework without distractions. Most of the building emptied out by 4 p.m., leaving just a few teachers, the janitorial staff, and me. I liked the silence. It was a nice contrast to the usual chaos of the day. That Thursday, I was hunched over my notebook in the library when Mr. Garvey, the janitor, shuffled in to clean. He was an older man, always friendly, but today his face looked almost worried. He glanced at me a few times while wiping down the tables. "You should head home soon, kid," he said abruptly. I looked up, startled. "I've still got a bit to do. I'll leave in a bit." He hesitated, then came closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, if the lockdown alarm goes off tonight, don't go near the gym. You hear me?" I frowned, confused. Why would there be a lockdown? Did something happen? He shook his head quickly. "Just stay away from the gym. Promise me." Before I could respond, he turned and walked off. I sat there, unsettled. His tone had been so serious. I tried to focus on my work, but his words lingered in my mind. Don't go near the gym. What did he mean by that? Why the gym specifically? About an hour later, just as I was packing up my things, the lockdown alarm blared through the school. "This is a code black. All staff and students initiate lockdown procedures immediately." My stomach dropped. A lockdown? At this hour? The librarian quickly ushered me and 2 other students into a back room, locking the door behind us. We huddled in silence. I tried to stay calm, but I was scared. My mind kept drifting back to Mr. Garvey's warning. Why had he seemed so certain a lockdown would happen? And why had he told me to avoid the gym? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, more than just the lockdown itself. Then suddenly a faint bang echoed through the walls. I glanced at the other students. They didn't seem to notice, too focused on their phones and whispering quietly to each other. Another sound joined the banging noise, a low groan that sent shivers down my spine. It was coming from the direction of the gym. I should have stayed put. I should have ignored it. But something about Mr. Garvey's warning gnawed at me. Why had he singled me out? Why the gym? Against every rational thought, I slipped out of the back room. The hallway was barely lit. The emergency lights was the only real source of light. I crept towards the gym. The closer I got, the louder the noises became. Deep, animalistic groans mixed with the unmistakable sound of something scraping against the ground. When I reached the gym doors, I hesitated. They were slightly open, and I could see a sliver of the darkened gymnasium beyond. I pushed the door open just enough to peer inside. The gym was pitch black except for a faint flickering light near the far corner. For a moment, I didn't see anything unusual. Just the same old bleachers, basketball hoops, and mats. Then something moved. At first, I thought it was a person, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was wrong. It was hunched over, and its body was too long to be a human. It dragged something behind it, a heavy, limp shape that made noises against the ground with every step. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. The creature stopped. It turned its head slowly in my direction. For a moment, I thought it had seen me. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to disappear into the shadows. The gym was silent except for my breathing. Then came the footsteps, slow but unmistakably heading straight for the door where I was. I panicked, backing away as quietly as I could. The door creaked slightly as I pulled it shut, and I froze, hoping that thing hadn't heard it. The footsteps stopped on the other side of the door. I held my breath. My body was shaking with fear. Suddenly, the door started shaking as something slammed into it from the other side. I turned and ran. Behind me, I could hear the door burst open, and those footsteps were now chasing after me. I rounded the corner and nearly collided with Mr. Garvey. "What did I tell you?" he hissed, grabbing my arm. I heard something," I stammered, struggling to catch my breath. His face darkened. "You shouldn't have gone near the gym." He pulled me into a nearby supply closet and locked the door. We sat in the darkness, listening. The footsteps eventually faded, replaced by the eerie silence of the lockdown. When the all-clear was finally given, I rushed out of the school without looking back. The next day, the school was closed for maintenance, and no one seemed to know what had happened during the lockdown. I decided to head over to the school and see for myself, but when I got there, there were all these strange government vehicles, police, military, and people in suits. I tried to talk to them, but they told me to get lost and not to interfere. I saw Mr. Garvey, but he avoided me, refusing to answer my questions. To this day, I don't know what I saw in that gym, but it was real. The appearance of military and police confirms that. I'm just glad that whatever it was didn't catch me.